Fox News Podcast presents Brett Baer's All-Star Panel.
America's got to be in the lead if you want to deal with these threats. We're going to lead.
The mourning is over. The Shiva is done. And if you're a conservative, you should be optimistic.
You know, my main priority right now is making sure that it delivers for the American people.
We have to make our country great again, and I will do that.
I think the president gets criticized by people all the time for the stuff he says, by people who ignore what he does.
Now, Fox's chief political anchor, Brett Baer.
It's Judgment Week in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial as closing arguments are delivered and the jury heads into deliberation likely. On Tuesday, while arguments were being made, the Biden administration found a way to make its presence known outside the trial, sending two former U.S. Capitol Police officers and actor Robert De Niro to hold a news conference outside the courthouse condemning the former president.
That's why I needed to be involved and wanted to be involved in the new Biden-Harris ad, because it shows the violence of Trump and reminds us that he'll use violence against anyone who stands in the way of his megalomania and greed. But it's a coward's violence.
Though the Biden administration has largely ignored the former president's trial thus far, this new interest comes as President Biden continues to trail the former president in the majority of polls, especially in the swing states. Meanwhile, overseas, Israel continues receiving international backlash for an airstrike on Rafah over the weekend that killed at least 45 people, some of them children. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that this was not his intended outcome, stating it was, quote, a tragic mishap. But how it will further impact Israel's relationships with allies like the U.S. remains to be seen. As of now, to discuss all of this and more, we bring in our panel. Wall Street Journal editorial board member Bill McGurn, Fox News Radio political analyst Josh Kraushaar, and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. Josh, what about the Biden administration taking a sudden interest in this trial?
I mean, this was quite something today as closing statements began when you have Robert De Niro and Harry Dunn, Capitol Hill police officer who was on the scene on January 6th. I mean, they realize they need to have a message. And it seems like there's a divide, Brett, between a faction of the Biden reelection campaign that really wants to fight and prepare if Trump is convicted to make an argument on those lines to really start getting the public to pay attention to the trial. I don't think that many Americans have really been paying close attention to the ins and outs of what's been going on in the courtroom. It's not been on camera. It's we've been hearing about it from reports day in, day out. But I think the majority of Americans, according to polls, show that a lot of Americans think this is a politically motivated case, and it's largely priced into how voters perceive Donald Trump. It hasn't moved the needle a whole lot. So it's interesting that, of all people, Robert De Niro was dispatched to New York. I don't think he was on message. He sort of prejudged Donald Trump's guilt in his comments this morning. I don't know if that's the message that the White House or the reelection campaign wanted, but certainly it means that the Biden folks want to actually have a message. They want to actually litigate about Trump's trial, and they've been trying to avoid it up until now.
Juan, your thoughts?
Well, I just think that it's kind of a surprise to see De Niro in that role. I think it's a celebrity versus celebrity. De Niro's celebrity bringing attention to Trump's celebrity on trial. I find the whole thing like a circus. I'm not sure from a political perspective that it's changing any minds. Potentially the presence of the police could help Biden. I mean, he wants to send the message that he's tough on crime, that he supports police, that he spent more on law enforcement than Trump did while Trump was president. I think you're going to see more and more of that emphasis out on the campaign trail. And of course, I think they want to call attention to the fact that Trump is on trial. And I think today we heard that, some of the Biden people saying if Trump is convicted, they're going to call him the convicted felon Donald Trump, much as you would say King Charles or something. They'll always refer to him as convicted felon Donald Trump. He might not be going to jail even if convicted because he'll appeal, but they will hang that around his neck, like a burdensome, like a yoke on a donkey.
And Bill, how do you think that translates politically?
Well, I kind of agree with Juan and Josh. I thought today was a sideshow with Robert De Niro getting in a shouting match with the heckler. I'm not sure it benefits the president to be outside a trial with his team, making a political issue out of it, when one of the issues is whether, this is just another political attempt to get Donald Trump. I agree with Juan. What they're after is convicted felon. To always talk about Donald Trump as a convicted felon gives them something to talk about. I'm not sure it's the best message when people are worried about inflation. The world seems to be going to a head. But given the president's lack of success with other messages, like on the economy, it might be the best that he has. And I'm not sure it is going to move the needle. I mean, before the trial, there was a percentage saying they might change their vote for Trump to be against him if he's convicted. But I'm not so sure now.
Yeah, and if you're looking, Josh, to avoid putting the former president in the position of being a sympathetic figure, maybe that press conference outside is not the best tact.
I've always found that whenever we've seen challengers to Donald Trump, opponents to Donald Trump, try to play his game, try to match celebrity with celebrity, try to, go below the belt, if you will, it's always backfired. I mean, I remember Marco Rubio and Donald Trump at the 2016 debate. The first debate featuring Biden and Trump. I don't think it helped either one of them. But usually, like, playing at Trump's level by matching celebrity to celebrity or by trading insults, that has always played in Trump's favor. I've been looking at the polling too, and I've been struck by how static the public opinion is. It doesn't seem like anyone is really changed their opinions of Donald Trump since the trial began. There was a Quinnipiac poll just last week that found only 6% of Trump voters, would-be Trump voters, would actually change their mind, even if a conviction happened in this case. So, I mean, look, I think we're sort of seeing the spectacle of the trial. I think that the Biden campaign is sort of in a pickle because they do, as Bill was saying, like, the economy is their biggest vulnerability. They need to at least neutralize their vulnerability when it comes to the most important issue in the race. And they don't want to get into a tit for tat with Donald Trump on the trial. And I think they want to let whatever happens in the trial speak for itself.
Panel, we'll hold it right there. Time is running out. I mean, we're 5 months, Juan, but you see these pieces like in Politico and elsewhere where Democrats are fretting, and there's all kinds of worrying about Biden and his position. And there's still all this talk about something going to happen at the convention, but it seems more far-fetched by the day.
Without a doubt, if you mean something happened like they select another candidate, Brett?
Right.
Yeah, I don't see that. I never did see that. But I think that the degree of anxiety is high in part because on the Democratic side, it's seen as really, the possibility of going back to Donald Trump, and as President Biden puts it, a threat to democracy itself. So they see it in apocalyptic terms, and I think they don't see it as just a loss, but a loss for the country. So that's their view. But I think that if you're looking at these polls, which is inciting all this anxiety, the fact is the numbers haven't moved a lot for President Biden, that Donald Trump remains in the lead, and specifically in a lot of these swing states. On the Democratic side, the pollsters are pointing out that if you look at people who voted in 2020, then, President Biden is still winning, but it's the undecideds. It's people who are, what they call low propensity voters who don't pay attention until September or October. Those folks are like, right now, they're like, you know what, I guess I'll go with Trump. And that's what's pushing Trump's numbers. And so the hope for the Democrats is that when people actually focus, that they will then make a choice and not go back to Trump.
Bill, meantime, the situation in the Middle East continues to get, more complicated, more tense. This latest strike by Israel in Rafah and the response by the Israeli prime minister that it was a tragic mishap has only fueled the critics of how the administration and Israel are dealing with this.
Yeah, that's the problem with war, especially in the social media integrated world communications network age. We felt some of it when we were in the Bush administration. The key, I think, right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is determined to go into Rafah and root out Hamas. And I think his logic is, he said this was a tragic mishap and they're going to investigate. I've never heard a Hamas statement that when they killed the grandma or something, it was a tragic mishap. It was a deliberate, intentional kill on their part. And I think what the prime minister has to do, he has to win the war. It's kind of like Bush with the surge. Until the surge, every day the headlines were bad, and even conservative allies remember this. They were calling for us to get out. The surge changed everything. Victory does. And I think Netanyahu is betting the world is going to go against him, the International Criminal Court and so forth. All the bodies are going to be against him. He has to change the facts on the ground by prevailing in Rafah. And then he can see what the change situation is, the facts on the ground change. He could be more open to deals about what a post-Hamas Gaza would look like. I don't think he has any choice now, but he's made it more difficult because it's only going to inspire more criticism.
Yeah, and more pushback. And Josh, right. Obviously, the Biden administration is kind of in limbo here. They want to continue to say that they support Israel again and again, however, are doing and saying things that at least indicate their displeasure as they're trying to make a Middle East peace deal to come together, a negotiation with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that after the tragic accident, as Netanyahu called it over the weekend, that killed several dozen Palestinian civilians in Gaza, that you didn't hear the White House telling the Israelis to stop what they're doing in Rafah. I mean, the thing that got Biden in a little bit of hot water a few weeks ago was that he set a red line about a full-scale invasion of Rafah. What the Israelis are doing now is perhaps a little bit short of that, but they are going full guns ablazing. They have an ongoing military operation in the city. Maybe it's not quite at the level that was originally planned, but even as European leaders, a lot of diplomats in Europe and elsewhere condemned Israel, the White House did withhold criticism this time around, which shows that, maybe they should have. I think there are a lot of folks who would like Israel to win the war, as Bill was saying. I think then a lot of progress could be made when it comes to dealing with a regional agreement with the Saudis and other allies and trying to figure out a plan for rebuilding Gaza. But as long as Hamas is in charge, that is extremely difficult, if not impossible to do. So, there's sort of this one step back, half step, or one step forward, half step back in how the Israelis are engaged. But I don't think until Israel wins the war and ousts Hamas from power, it's going to be hard for the White House to stop having to deal with these headaches.
And Juan, these negotiations with Hamas through Qatar and other places just haven't materialized anything substantial. Short of that, they have to watch as Israel continues its campaign and then see the pushback in places like Michigan and elsewhere.
That's a big problem. And, the thing about it, most wars, I think all wars end with some kind of negotiation, even when you have a clear victor. And so in this situation, though, the idea that you're going to eliminate Hamas, it seems a bit much because Hamas just bombed Tel Aviv last week. While, Israel is in Gaza, in Rafah. So I don't know that a total victory over Hamas is going to happen. It's hard to see. And that Israel, to me, looking from the United States, I see Israel more and more isolated on the international front. And that includes the Saudis, who, want to do a deal with the United States and Israel that would isolate Iran. But right now, all the Arab nations are really frozen in place, paralyzed, because they can't posture as Israel's friend while Israel continues this assault on Rafah. It just doesn't seem like there's any prescription that I can see for a happy ending.
Yeah. And it's three-dimensional chess and has a lot of implications, not only here, but around the world. Panel, thanks. Now for a bit of history. On May 30th, 1922, the Lincoln Memorial was dedicated in Washington, D.C., now known as Memorial Day. The dedication of the memorial occurred on the aptly named Dedication Day in front of 50,000 people, while another 2 million tuned in via radio. Designed by architect Henry Bacon and sculpted by Daniel Chester French, the memorial remains proudly displayed in Washington, D.C., standing as a symbol of how far we've come as a nation and how we still have room to grow. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Josh, Juan, and Bill, I'm Brett Baer. We'll see you next time. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.